Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us in week 3 of the Summer of Code. Today we have a great workshop being delivered by Andrew from GoldSky, so I hope you're all looking forward to it. I'm going to invite him up to stage and we can jump right in. No announcements really from me this week. You should be getting ready and building now, but hopefully today's workshop will be useful for anyone who's interested in learning how to index. Using the GoldSky tools and potentially integrating them into their projects. Andrew, welcome. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you. Excited to be here.
Great stuff. Okay, if you want to share your screen, we can jump right in.
Awesome. Well, I'll probably do a bit of a general high-level overview before I share my screen, just to kind of tell people about me and about GoldSky, and then I'll dive in from there if that sounds good. Cool. Well, hello, everybody. Thank you for hopping on today. I'm excited to be here. I think that, there's a lot of really exciting stuff probably being built out for this hackathon. So very much looking forward to seeing what everybody builds out. If you've never heard of GoldSky before, I want to take a moment to just kind of take a step back and give you a little overview of what exactly GoldSky is and what problem you're trying to solve here. So essentially, when you're building out apps that leverage on-chain data, whether it's for some kind of analytics purpose, like let's say you want to build out a dashboard, or you're just tracking network activity because, maybe you want to have some kind of points program or some kind of incentives distribution where you need to analyze what's happening on chain to figure out, what your next steps are. So analytics purposes, or also if you're building out some kind of dApp where, you want to base specific on-chain events as, the main impact to how the app reacts, right? Let's say maybe to access the app, you want to have it so that they need to confirm a certain asset, or they have to have a certain amount of tokens in their wallet, right? So basically anything that your app might require to verify with on-chain, you'll want to look on-chain. So essentially the root cause of, the need for indexing in general is wanting to look at on-chain data in an efficient and, basically easily accessible way. So essentially right now, if you were to just take away indexing and not think about that type of tooling, there's ways where you can look on chain, such as, calling RPCs directly. And it can be a lot of just headache because there's maintenance you have to do. It can be slow. Oftentimes you can get rate limited. And, if you're looking directly on the chain, it's not going to be as custom as what you might need. Let's say, for example, you want to analyze a specific contract on Etherlink versus, analyzing the entire network. It's going to be a lot harder to do that if you're just reading on chain directly. So essentially, this is where indexing comes in. It's basically a way to really efficiently track on-chain data and then use that however you want. And that's where GoldSky comes in. We're essentially an indexing provider where we're a tool that developers can leverage to basically, for their app or their website or, whatever purpose they have to use on-chain data, you can basically really efficiently do that. And there's a couple different ways you can do that. And I'm going to go over both of those during this workshop today. And they are subgraphs and mirror pipelines. So to kind of give a really general high-level overview before we dive into the details, subgraphs are essentially a way to think of it as like getting a magnifying glass and you're looking on chain and then you're pulling the data that you want specifically. And then you're going to basically have this endpoint, a GraphQL endpoint that you can call, and it's going to effectively query that information in a really efficient, fast way. So think of it as basically taking the exact information you need from on-chain, having it organized into a data structure that you can query, and then you basically have an endpoint that you can call, and that can be, either to power your backend or your front end or whatever you need. But that's at a very high level what subgraphs do. And now mirror pipelines, on the other hand, they're similar in the sense that you're also looking at on-chain data and you're efficiently indexing it. But rather than having an endpoint that you query, you're actually taking this on-chain data and you're putting it into your own database. So whatever system you're using, whether it's something like Postgres, ClickHouse, S3, you're essentially having that on-chain data directly in your database so that you can query it. So it's really, really efficient if you need real-time data streaming where, latency is really important. You're building an app where you want it to be very fast. If you're trying to make a Web3 app with the Web2 experience, speed is going to matter a lot. So that's where Subgraphs and Mirror comes in. It's basically making it so that whatever data you're looking at, it's very fast and efficient. And then there's reliable uptime, because you want to make sure the information is accurate and that, it can reliably be there when you need it, right? So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen and tell you a little bit more about GoldSky and then dive into the product. So let me go ahead and share my screen. Alrighty, cool. So goldsky.com, that's where you can go if you want to find out a little bit about us. But essentially the Subgraphs Mirror products. Oh, yeah.
Do you want to remove us from the bottom right? Because we can see on your screen share.
I think that's fine. Is it good?
Yeah,
I think it's cool. Awesome. And yeah, so basically you go on our website. This is going to give you just a good overview of, who we are, who are some of the customers we work with. You've probably heard of a lot of these names, Unichain, Zora, Arweave, Polymarket. These are all really big crypto companies. So you can feel safe knowing that, if the best of the best in Web3 are trusting that this infrastructure is solid, then you can feel safe knowing that you're going to be good too. But essentially, depending on the chain you're building on, whether it's Etherlink, mainnet, any chain you have, there's a lot of different ways that you can get flexible about building here. But yeah, take a look at our website, play around. There's a lot of cool case studies we have too. These are really cool ways to just kind of deep dive and understand, what are some of the ways that companies have used us. So we've got one on proof of play, POAP, Zai, Daylight, a lot of really helpful case studies to just kind of dive into, learn about what's GoldSky about, what are some of the different ways that people are using our products, and how can you combine indexing with whatever use case you're building out. But essentially, let's dive into the actual product. So this is, by the way, the dashboard. This is just, you go on app.goldsky.com. If you've never signed up for an account, we can just go through that flow really quick right here. So you go to app.goldsky.com, sign up, and it's very, very simple and easy. You can even just continue with Google. So you can either continue with your email or just do SSO. And then once you sign up for an account, super simple, you will just go to the tab that you want to do whatever it is that you need to do. And quick little shout out, if you go to the Etherlink Hackathon page and you go over here, you'll see that there's this code you can use, Summer of Code, where when you sign up for an account, you get free access for the duration of this hackathon. So anybody building that's part of the Etherlink ecosystem that is doing this hackathon, you get to use GoldSky for free for this hackathon. So definitely take advantage of that. And you'll be able to have, as much data as you need, do whatever you want for the next few weeks. And it'll give you a really good, solid overview of, what you can expect with the GoldSky experience. And just some helpful resources here. With GoldSky, there is a CLI, so you can install that and either get really codey in the terminal, or you can use the app if you prefer the more front end experience. But we've got some guides here for how to install the CLI, how to deploy a subgraph, how to create a pipeline. So a lot of really good documentation here for you to check out. And I do recommend checking out Subgraphs versus Mirror, because that'll give you a good overview on when to use one or the other, because they're both very effective, and it just kind of depends on your use case. Although oftentimes when it comes to really, really, large apps, if scalability matters, Mirror will often outperform. But subgraphs are very effective in their own way too. So it just kind of depends on your use case. But yeah, definitely go to the Hacker Pack section, take a look at that code, sign up for an account, and follow along with the workshop with your own account. So basically, to get started, we're just going to get going with a really simple deployment of a subgraph. And you'll see it's actually very, very easy to do. So once you're in the Subgraphs tab, first things first, you're just going to hit Deploy Subgraph, and you'll see this little pop-up appear. And when it comes to the naming format, you see how it says my-subgraph? That's kind of how you'll want to follow. So for this one, we can do Etherlink demo. Now, contract address, network, start block, contract ABI, these are just things to help you get very custom about what it is that you're trying to index. So for this specific example, we're going to go to the Etherlink Explorer, and I was just going to show you just a top token, right? So it doesn't really matter any kind of contract you want, but for this example, I just went to the tokens page and we'll do USD coin. Obviously, USDC is a very popular one. It's very, widely used across many chains. So this is just a contract that we can know is legit. So basically, first thing you'll want to do is click into the contract page, and you'll want to confirm that this is the right contract to use. So here it says contract source code verified, exact match, thumbs up. That is what we want to see. So we're good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and copy this contract, go back to the subgraph page, drop it in there. Super easy, step one. Step two, we're doing this on Etherlink, so just select that network. Now, the next couple say optional, but I do think it's helpful to include because this is how you can really fine tune, the kind of information that you want to get from on-chain. So let's say for this specific contract for USDC, we maybe don't necessarily want all historical data. We're just looking for, the last few weeks or a specific time frame. So what you can do is if you go into the transactions tab, you'll see that there's block data here. So as an example, I'll just take a more recent block, drop it in here, and I'll probably change that number to something like, I don't know, I'll change that to a 1, just so that it goes a little bit further back in time so that it's not as new, just so we have a little bit of data to populate. So we've got the address, the network, the start block. Now you're going to want to take the ABI. Think of the ABI as almost like the Google Translate of, on-chain data. So you have this contract here. It's going to have this ABI section over here. And when you scroll through it, you'll see that, there's various things, address, owner, value, right? There's like all these properties. So basically the ABI, it's essentially the blueprint for when you're taking that on-chain data, it'll essentially translate it into events that you can then query, right? So basically the ABI is like the blueprint for when you're looking on-chain to kind of make it more readable data, and then you can actually action that information. So we've got everything we want. We got the subgraph name. It's the first version, contract address, network, start block, contract ABI. And by the way, I'll show you in a bit, but there's a version because you can have multiple versions of the same subgraph. So let's say you deploy a subgraph and then you realize, oh, I actually want to go further back, or I want to do a different kind of information. So basically, if you want to have a new version, then you can deploy it and then you can make it, version 2.0, for example. But for this, it's the first version. So we're all set. We're going to hit deploy. Give it a second. Cool. So now we're going to give it a little bit of a second to just index. But as you can see here, this is the block that it's starting. This is the current block. So it's basically going from start to finish, and it's indexing. And because we started from, not all the way at the beginning, it'll probably be a little faster to index. But basically, any time that you deploy a subgraph, you're going to see this kind of page. And it's going to give you insights into, any kind of helpful metrics regarding that subgraph that you deployed. So entities, for example, this is just going to give you just a high-level overview of essentially how much data that you are indexing, because when you deploy a subgraph, it's going to eat up costs, right? So you want to be mindful of how many entities you are using, because you don't want to, deploy a subgraph to track an entire chain and then just rack up a big bill. You probably want to be more specific about the data that you need and, index a specific contract or a specific time frame. So metrics to follow, entities, definitely very important. You can also adjust based on day, week, month, if you want to have specific timeframes of data to review. And as you can see, this is already live because we indexed it from kind of a more recent block. So it's very fast index that data. And we'll just refresh the page real quick. So essentially the rest of the information here, you can see API requests. This is going to be basically going up anytime you're calling the endpoint. So right here, you have this public GraphQL link. If you click that, call the endpoint, you'll see a lot of data will populate. And basically, you can look at this data as, what the ABI was using as a blueprint to spit out, right? So you have addresses from, to, timestamp, value, block number, right? So this is an example of index data. Honestly, you typically won't just be using this endpoint here and querying directly. you're more likely to be using this endpoint in your app, and then your app calls the endpoint, or your front end or back end calls the endpoint and then uses that data. But this is just a good visualizer for you to get an understanding of what type of data is indexed with your subgraph. And as you can see, because I did call the endpoint and I executed the query, that bumps up the number of requests. So it was at 2, so I'll refresh and then it'll probably say 4. Yeah, see, there it is. So yeah, basically API request is going to show you, how many times you're calling the endpoint so that you can keep track of that. Then there's some other data too, like average handler time, ETH call time. And over here at the bottom, you've got a log to just show you all the different events that are happening. Entities is going to be the types of entities that you are indexing with this contract. So we've got approvals, transfers, and that's how many that we've had in, the duration from the block that we chose. So essentially, this is all just really useful data when you're looking at a subgraph and you want to basically understand the metrics of the deployed subgraph. Couple things to note that are very cool. So in the beginning, when we were talking about the subgraph version, so let's say you have a second version that you want to deploy for the subgraph, but in your app, you've already used the endpoint, let's say for your front end. So instead of having to update your app to basically, now have a new endpoint, what you can do is use something called a tag. So let's say for this one, we'll call it prod because, let's assume we're using it for the production version of my app, whatever app that is. So now I've got here this new public GraphQL endpoint. So I hit that, and this, as you can see at the top, it shows prod. So instead of version 1.0.0 or 2.0 or 3.0, whichever one it is, it's just going to say prod. Even if I deploy another version, I can just always refer to the prod endpoint because let's say it's in my app and I have that basically baked in so that, anytime my app calls the endpoint, it calls the prod link. And that's really useful because that way I don't have to continuously update my app. I can just have one fixed endpoint. And then using this tag, it'll basically update because anytime I deploy a new version, it'll just associate with that tag. So tags are super helpful, and they're a pretty cool feature of subgraphs. And then we've also got webhooks. So webhooks, we've actually got a guide that kind of dives into what webhooks do. But essentially think of it as like these notifications or automatic actions you can trigger, but you're basically receiving real-time HTTP post requests based on your subgraphs. So let's say anytime a specific event happens, you can trigger that webhook and it can automate a lot of things in your app. So webhooks and tags definitely make subgraphs pretty cool. And, in general, they're a very powerful tool. But yeah, this is an example of subgraphs for an Etherlink contract, in this case, USDC. So just to kind of review, you've got this status live here, shows you the start block, end block. You can track all of your requests, all of your entities, call times. These are your tags, your webhooks, entities, logs. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about subgraphs. And yeah, this is your link. Also, one final thing, let's say you don't want the GraphQL link to be public. You can actually create a private one. And then that way, let's say you want it to be, only accessible by you. You don't want it to, be found. And for what it's worth, even if it's public, it's not like someone's just going to be able to find it easily unless they have that direct link. But if you do want to be more careful about it, you can create a private link. So that's subgraphs for you. And subgraphs are really effective, especially if you're just trying to, take a look at some historical data, or let's say you want to make your app powered by some kind of webhooks where any on-chain event that happens, the webhook is triggered and it changes something in your app. But as you start scaling and as, as the on-chain transaction speeds just start to get much faster, right? As TPS increases, as the amount of people on networks increases, as apps just basically get faster and faster, sometimes you'll start seeing subgraphs not really be able to keep up when it comes to really needing to scale and, be extremely high latency and just real time essentially. So that's where Mirror comes in. Mirror is a product that GoldSky released in the past. I believe this was about a year ago, maybe almost 2 years ago. So it's relatively new, but essentially one thing to note is that with subgraphs, those are EVM only. So basically there was limitations as non-EVM chains were coming out because you couldn't really deploy subgraphs. So Mirror, it's a way where you can index on-chain data, and it's a different format. So you're not necessarily restricted to EVM. We actually allow you to use Mirror pipelines with very many different non-EVM chains. But of course, in this case, it is still EVM with Etherlink. So subgraphs are an option. But let's say you have an app and you start to scale into really, really high amounts of usage, and you want it to be very, very fast. You want it to be basically Web 2 speeds fast. So Mirror is something to definitely take a look into, and we're going to dive into what exactly these pipelines are. But essentially, let's say you create a new pipeline and you'll be in this what we call flow window, right? So GoldSky Flow is essentially a visualizer of how you can deploy a pipeline. So we'll start off by naming this project. We'll do Etherlink demo. Now, the first thing you're going to want to do is take your data source. So just like before, when we did deploy Subgraph and it showed us what kind of network we want, what kind of contract we want, this is a very similar type of flow. You want to basically choose the data source you want. So in this case, obviously, we're going to go Etherlink. We'll choose Etherlink, and we'll go ERC20 transfers. So there's a few different data sets you can choose from. You can either choose from raw blocks, raw logs, transactions, and in GoldSky on the app. Here, actually, I'll save this and exit real quick. Whoop. My browser's freaking out. Sorry about that. Brave is not cooperating for some reason.
Yeah, I think your video in the bottom right has frozen as well.
Oh my God, that's a weird one. Here, I'm going to stop sharing and then
Maybe that's
come back. That's pretty funny. Man, I'm like a robot.
Yeah.
Okay, give me 1 second.
There are a couple of questions in the chat if you wanted to go through them now, or if it's reloading, we can go through them at the end.
Yeah, my browser is totally not cooperating right now. Okay. Oh, I think I'm back, kind of. This is very weird. I wish I could show you my screen because I just see your video and my video, and the chat bot is now flickering. Yeah, this is very odd. I'm just going to reload this, see if that helps.
Thanks for bearing with us, everyone. This is an interesting new issue that I've never seen happen in Livestorm before. So learn something new every day. Thank you for your questions so far. Palash and Ray, we'll probably cover them at the end once Andrew's finished his demo. Let's try. Oh, no. Andrew's here again. Andrew's getting ready to join me, which is great. Hello, welcome back.
All right. I think I'm back. I just restarted Brave.
Okay, great. Let's try again.
All righty, perfect. So little halftime show for everybody there. That was totally planned. All right, a couple questions in the chat. I'll address those while I'm here. Is it possible to track contract factories? Example, index events from a contract factory and also events from the contracts that the factory creates. I feel like I should know what a contract factory is, but I actually don't. So I'm afraid I can't answer that question. But if you go to contact us at support@goldsky.com, I'm sure you can throw that to our tech services guys and they will definitely know. Unless, Palash, you teach me right now what a factory is on the spot, and then I can wing it for you. Let's see what he says. All right, he's going to teach me. Cool. This is cool. It's a two-way street. Now I'm learning today. And to prove ownership of a private link, I believe you would just have to use your authorization header, I believe. And how do you make your tab name Dynamid? Dynamid? I mean dynamic?
Possibly. Ree, can you confirm? Maybe yes. Someone's just sent thumbs up, so that might be Ree.
Also, Palash, in general, I don't know if you have Super Grok, which is like Grok 4, but if you ask it anything about GoldSky, it's pretty good. All right, let's see. Oh, okay. Yeah, I don't think that should be a problem. I mean, basically you can index like all chain events, and then you can just query them directly when you're calling the endpoint. So, yeah, I think you could definitely track that. Pretty much anything that happens on chain, you can track it when it's indexed. The anticipation is killing me here, Palash. Oh, I think I know what you're saying. I think I know what you mean. So, okay, let's say as an example, you wanted to track USDC on Ethereum. The mainnet contract address on Etherscan is actually a proxy. So you'll want to click under the contract tab, is this a proxy? And then go to the original contract. And that's the address you'll want to deploy the subgraph with, not the proxy. Not sure if that's what you were referring to. I see. So they're basically two separate contracts that you want to index. Because with a subgraph, for example, if you deploy a subgraph for a specific contract, you would have to do a second subgraph for the other contract. But this is where mirror pipelines can come in very, very handy, because essentially when you're creating a pipeline, you can have multiple sources. So you can actually have one contract, another contract, an entire chain, even a different chain, even off chain, and basically have all these different data sources go into one sink. And I'll go over what a sink is, but it's basically a database. So let's say you want to combine a bunch of different information. Yeah, it can. You can actually add a transform to basically query specifically what you need. So like, let's say, here's a cool example. Let's say you want to look at one contract address and then another contract address, and you want to find where a specific wallet address has used both contracts. So you can basically use one source as one contract, another source as another. Then you would make a transform where you filter based on only events from a specific user's wallet address. and then it'll spit that out. So you can get really custom about it. But yeah, I think for your use case, Mirror is probably going to be much easier and faster. And perfect segue into using Mirror. I'll show you right now how to deploy a pipeline. Yeah, definitely take a look at the docs. They're very helpful in there. But yeah, all right, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Hopefully we don't trip out again this time. All righty, cool. So we are now back into the pipeline demo. And so step one here, I'll just remove this just to start from the very beginning. So you choose your data source. So in this case, we're going to go with Etherlink. And we'll just go ERC20 transfers. And by the way, you can actually use a subgraph as a source. It's just probably going to be a lot faster to just use a data set that's already basically pre-indexed. So these are just extremely useful and very helpful to have handy. So we'll go ERC20 transfer, start at the beginning. So let's say, depending on your use case, if you want to go historical data, then you'll start it at the beginning. But let's say you want to make an app where you're using these pipelines, you got real-time data streaming plugging directly into your database, and you just want to track on-chain events as they happen. So you can actually just start at current, because you might not need historical data. You might just need, okay, from here on out. So depending on what you need, that's where you would choose indexing at. And then filter by contract address. We'll just go ahead and take that same address from here. Drop that in there, right? So next up, this is where it can get pretty custom. So if you go custom SQL, this is where you can select a specific query. So let's say, for example, you open this up and you see all these different variables, right? You can customize it so that what you're spitting out is based on, let's say you want it to be a specific address, or you want it to be a specific subset of wallets that have a certain token in them, or you want to look at a specific wallet address. So any kind of really custom thing you can do in SQL here, and then you can run it to basically test out if it runs successfully before you actually deploy. But this is a very useful feature because you can just get, extremely specific about the kind of data that you want. So you can do transforms. There's also HTTP handlers that you can set up so that, it kind of gets broadcasted to another database and then modified there and then comes back. But essentially SQL transfers are the more common one. So then once you pick your source, you pick how you want to transform that source. You then choose a sink. Now, this is the very key part and basically what makes Mirror extremely valuable. You would just choose the sink based on what kind of database you have. So whether you have Postgres, MySQL, S3, ClickHouse, right? Essentially, you would just choose the database that you're already using, and that's how it would just basically live. It would live in your own database. So for this example, I'll just pick one I've already got. It's all set here. And, you'll probably want to name this table something like Etherlink transfers, right? Just to be more specific about what kind of data you're having. And I won't actually deploy it because it would, deploy resources and then start pushing a ton of data into our database. But essentially what you can know that once you deploy it, it's basically going to have a very similar window to what you had with the subgraphs, where you can see how many entities are written, how many entities, which basically gives you the insights into how much data was actually put into your database, and then all the different logs and basically. So essentially the key thing to know here is that when you're indexing with Mirror, it's going to be real-time data streaming. So this is just going to be live, constantly put into your database. And rather than having a GraphQL endpoint that you call and query, you're going to be querying directly from your database. So as you can imagine, that's going to be significantly faster. And as far as latency, you're literally just limited to the speed of your database. So if you have an app and you have, that app's backend connected to your database, and then you have a pipeline with GoldSky plugging on-chain Etherlink ERC20 transfer data into your database, then it's just going to be a really, really fast, fluid experience. And what's cool about this is, let's say, for example, you want to analyze bridge data, right? So you can have one source be ERC20 transfers, and then you can make another source basically ETH mainnet transfers. And then you can kind of, input both of that chain data into your database, and then basically query within your database, comparing the different chains, right? So any kind of use case that's going to be multi-chain, cross-chain, combining off-chain with on-chain, or just requires extreme speed and reliability because, your app is scaling very quickly, that's where mirror pipelines are going to come in very handy. So essentially, to just kind of close it out, sum it up, Subgraphs, you're taking a look at on-chain data with basically magnifying glass, pulling that data, and you have an endpoint that you call when you want to query it. Mirror pipelines, you're basically plugging in a data streaming pipeline directly from on-chain into your database, and then you're querying from your database so that you can own that data. It's extremely fast, and you can combine the data with any chain or off-chain information or whatever internal database you have too. Like, let's say you've got your own whole set of tables with internal terms, you can, query it to that. So pretty much that's GoldSky. We've got Subgraphs, we've got Mirror. We've got more products coming down the line, but these are the main ones for now. And just to kind of give you a little next step overview, let's say you want to get started and somebody was asking about pricing. So the best place to check out for pricing would be goldsky.com/pricing, because we have this calculator at the bottom where you can basically input, how many subgraphs you think you'll be using, which product you think you'll be using, right? So let's say, as an example, it says here, if you're not sure about, you should select an example chain to prefill values. So let's say I wanted to take mirror and I wanted to just take unichain data and just mirror that into my database. All I wanted is in my database, all unichain data, basically just live. That'll be about $243 per month, right? So essentially, as you scale up, obviously it's going to cost more. But if you're a really big dApp and you're really starting to see some like pretty insane usage, that's when it probably makes more sense to go to enterprise, where we start doing, contracts and way deeper discounts. But in the very beginning, pricing is very much reasonable. In fact, you can do a lot of stuff for free without even paying for anything, because the first set of entities and deployments, they're actually free. So you can get away with a lot without actually even paying. And when you do start paying, it's pretty relatively cheap, because the data, it just depends on how much data you have. But yeah, next stop, I would suggest you go to GoldSky documentation. So docs.goldsky.com. Take a look just at the introduction page. There's quick start guides, full guides. Take a look at, how to deploy a subgraph, how to create a pipeline. And, we've got a lot of really helpful information here. So definitely take a look. And if you have any questions, feel free to reach out to us on our X account. I'll show you which one we've got. We are x.com/goldskyo. This is our page over here. And it also links to our website. But yeah, I'm going to pause there, see if there's any questions in the chat.
I think Palash shared some context about the contract pattern that he was talking about, including an app that he's building, Semicolon, if you want to look at that. Harold said thank you, which mirrors my message. Thank you very much, Andrew, for coming into this session. I hope everyone in the room found it useful, and that you're going to go on to utilize GoldSky for your indexing needs in the projects that you're building for the hackathon. We'll wait a minute now and see if there's any extra questions on people's minds. But otherwise, we will wrap up for today very soon. A quick announcement. Tomorrow we have an extra workshop being run by Hanji.io, who are an ecosystem partner for Etherlink. So they're going to come and talk through their on-chain order book exchange and what they've built and kind of maybe inspire you. Palash, as for GoldSky prizes, there aren't any prizes associated specifically with any of the community partners. They're just giving access to their tools, which is an amazing thing to have for the course of the hackathon. That counts for everyone. The prizes are all in the main track. So the 4 main tracks that we have, and then also the judge's choice, the community choice, and the special awards for super impressive apps, as decided by the judging team for special recognitions. So there's lots of prizes to go around, but none specifically linked to using particular tools. So please, everyone, use what you think you need. Don't try and integrate tools you don't need for the sake of using them. As cool as it is for you to get the opportunity to test them out during the hackathon, you might end up going down a pathway that you didn't need to go down, and you end up detracting from your original product because of it. So be mindful when you're using the tools that you use the ones that you definitely need, and leave the ones that you don't for now. I'm sure there'll be opportunities in the future when you'll need other tools and you can test them out then. So it doesn't look like we have any more questions. Thank you everyone for joining us on this Monday session. As I say, tomorrow we have one more workshop with the Hanji team. You should be receiving calendar invites for that very soon. The recording of this workshop, maybe with the little tech difficulty in the middle edited out, maybe not. Depends how nice I'm feeling. I don't know, it was quite funny anyway. Will be up tomorrow. So if you wanted to rewatch anything that Andrew did, because I know we had quite a deep dive, there was a lot going on. If you want to rewatch any of it, you can tomorrow. And yeah, any other questions, please put them in the Discord. Otherwise, everyone, enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you, Andrew, for joining us.
Of course, thank you for hosting.
No problem. Okay, everyone, see you soon.
Bye.
Bye.